Golden Sword Saga. Book 1. The Legend Begins. Prologue. It was a good time for all living in the earth. The lands were quiet and the sky was still, but all that was about to change. Eurythymus, the most acknowledged wizard of all time, had just created a weapon more powerful than anything else ever before. In no way at all was this a dark, dangerous weapon, but if it found its way into the wrong hands, the results would be catastrophic. This weapon was created deep in the lonely and forgotten caves of despair, also known as the Black Hole, through the dead hours of the night. Once finalized, Eurythymus gave his weapon a name. He decided on the Golden Sword, made from the gold which still remains hidden in the cave. The sword has the unstoppable power to vanquish all mortal and immortal souls. The world had never seen anything like it before. Drunk with the power that the sword had given Eurythymus, he bragged of his invincibility to anyone that would listen. "Yes, this sword, you see, I created it, all the way in the Black Hole," said Eurythymus one day to a local blacksmith in a very self-centered kind of tone. Everything was going exceptionally well for the wizard, because while Eurythymus possessed the golden sword, no one would ever dreamt of challenging him to anything, until one quiet night when something unbelievable happened. As usual, Eurythymus did his nightly routine of having a quick clean-up of the day's mess and himself all getting ready for another day, climbed into his bed, and eventually fell asleep. Like every other night in the village, there was not even the slightest sound, except for the quiet crunching of stones and pebbles beneath the approaching feet. The louder and faster the noises became, but still the wizard remained asleep in his bed, completely unaware of upcoming terror he was about to be a part of. Crime of any sort of wrongdoing was unheard of in the village, so hardly anyone ever locked their doors at night. The person who had been making the noises slowly crept his way through Eurythymus's front door and quickly glazed around. It was not a particularly large house. As soon as the trespasser had passed over the threshold, he was immediately in the sitting room, which consisted of a rather large table and a few chairs. Over to the left was a hallway, leading to the other rooms, one of which was Eurythymus's bedroom, and on the right side of the sitting room was something that looked like the world's smallest kitchen. But the intruder ignored the kitchen and headed straight towards the two bedrooms. It was obvious that the intruder had been here before, for he showed no sign of confusion about where to go. Silently and swiftly, he moved down the hallway, trying not to make any of the floorboards make a sound, and soon enough he started to creak open the door that was for Eurythymus's room. After gazing at the wizard's peaceful sleeping body, the intruder began to dart around, looking for the sword. Within a couple of minutes, he had found it, sitting on the floor, leaning against the wall out of harm's way. As fast but also as quiet as he could, the intruder snatched the sword off the wall and dashed for the front door without looking back. Eurythymus woke early next morning and almost passed out to his back immediately. It was gone. But no, surely not. No one would dare to steal it. After all his bragging and boasting of his wonderful creation, there was no way he could show himself again in the village. Everyone he had ever had any kind of run-in with would surely put Eurythymus in his right place. But he was one of the greatest wizards of all time. He could easily keep himself safe from a few townsfolk. Still, Eurythymus was frightened and ashamed of everything that he had done, and therefore it seemed only fitting for the wizard to leave quickly, before anyone knew or heard in the slightest that the sword was missing. So without questioning himself on what he was doing, Eurythymus packed only a few essentials like sleeping things and a few pots and pans, jumped on, and at the same time woke up his horse, and before the horse knew what was riding him, they both set off quickly for somewhere to hide, just as the sunrise started to creep over the hills that looked out to the village.